Good morning, I'm Joe Fryer.
And I'm Savannah Sellers. Right now on Morning News Now, it's being called a turning point in the coronavirus pandemic. The first kid-sized doses of Pfizer's vaccine now going into the arms of some of the youngest Americans.
For parents all over this country, this is a day of relief and celebration. Vaccinating our children will help us keep our schools open, keep our kids in the classroom.
We'll have more on the president's message to parents. Plus, we'll get a doctor's perspective as eligibility opens up to 28 million more people. Re-elected, a nail-biter in New Jersey comes to an end with NBC News projecting a narrow win in the race for governor for Democratic incumbent Phil Murphy in New Jersey. The latest results and what we're learning about the possibility of a recount. Disturbing details in a deadly DUI crash involving the now former Raiders wide receiver Henry Ruggs. What we're learning this morning about the moments before his Corvette slammed into another car, killing that driver, and the charges he now faces. And Family Feud, a new twist in Britney Spears' conservatorship battle. The pop star is now placing some of the blame on her mother, the new accusations she made in a now deleted Instagram post. Of course, we will always bring you the back and forth there. There's a lot to cover with Britney Spears.
Yes.
And a lot to get to this morning, starting with the White House urging millions of parents to get their young children the COVID shot.
Some are already doing just that after the CDC signed off on the Pfizer vaccine for kids as young as 5. Shots with smaller doses now going into smaller arms all across the country. President Biden says vaccinations for kids 5 to 11 will be in full swing starting next week.
As soon as next week, we'll have enough vaccine and enough places, and parents will be able to schedule appointments to get their kids their first shot. And we've already secured enough vaccine supply for every single child in America ages 5 through 11.
We have a team covering everything from this new vaccine rollout for kids to what researchers are learning about the impacts of long COVID. Let's begin with NBC News correspondent Ellison Barber from what may be the coolest place for a kid to get the vaccine, the American Museum of Natural History here in New York City. Ellison, kids as young as 5 already getting their first dose at places like the museum. What are you hearing from parents in New York about the Pfizer news?
Unsurprisingly, it is a mixed bag of reactions. There are some parents here who have really been waiting for this moment, and they cannot sign their child up fast enough. Others, they're worried about how it will impact their child. They're not sure if it is the right choice for their children, especially the youngest ones. Here's some of what we've heard.
I want to protect her, you know, keep the kids safe. So we're really excited that they're eligible. Shots, the kids are so excited to get the shot. So it's funny.
What do you think about it? Have your parents talked to you about COVID and the vaccine?
The thing is, when I first heard that it came out, I was actually the one to go to my mom to be like, hey mom, I want to get the vaccine at Natural History Museum.
The symptoms and the soreness of the arms and stuff like that, I don't know how it will affect my child. So I feel like maybe as she get a little older, we can kind of think about maybe 12, 13 of her getting vaccinated, but not at 5, 6, 7.
Nationwide, parents are pretty split on this. About 3 in 10 parents say they definitely will get their child in that 5 to 11 year range vaccinated, but a third say that they want to take a wait and see approach. And then you have about the same number of people saying they definitely won't do it, at least right now. Joe? So,
Ellison, instead of those massive vaccination sites we saw earlier this year, this stage of the vaccine rollout really focuses on pediatricians. I know you spoke to one doctor who says her phone's been ringing off the hook since the CDC signed off on the vaccine this week. How's it going for her so far?
Yeah, a place like this is a great option for people who want to come somewhere and just get it done here. But for a lot of people, they really want to do it with someone they trust, who they know very well, like their pediatrician. And so many parents, that's exactly what they plan to do. And when we spoke to a pediatrician here in Manhattan, she said that she does have a very pro-vaccine patient population. Those were her words. And she said that it has just been nonstop of people calling, trying to get appointments to bring their children in as soon as possible. They were vaccinating children almost up to 8 p.m. last night and had to turn some people away because they just didn't have enough vaccines open for those children last night. But she says the other thing for her, at least her group of patients, is that they, as New Yorkers, went through something very traumatic with the pandemic, and that also is driving them to get vaccinated. She thinks faster here than maybe in other places. Listen.
I think we also saw the worst. We've lived through the worst of COVID. I think New York is a very different animal than a lot of other places. When we have to go in an elevator with our unvaccinated kids, we don't always want to leave our apartment.
And one thing she pointed out is something that we saw when adults were first eligible to get vaccinated is you have an initial group of people who are very, very eager to get vaccinated. It's almost like a sugar rush of people coming as quickly as they can, and then it sort of levels off, and you have people who are maybe on the fence but can still be convinced, and that group is the one she says we really have to pay attention to. Joe?
Right, Allison Barber from one of the coolest vaccination sites around. Thanks, Allison.
Meanwhile, serious new concerns this morning about the long-term impact of COVID-19. A new study shows that in some cases, the virus can attack the brain, resulting in long-term neurological effects. NBC News health and medical reporter Erica Edwards joins us now with more on these latest findings. Erica, good morning. This is sort of a scary one and one that I know we keep slowly learning more about. So walk us through this new report. We've heard of COVID impacting a patient's lungs, of course, but tell us exactly what it can do to other parts of the body, including the brain, and what effect it has, especially long-term.
Yeah. Hey, Savannah. Good morning. So first of all, this research is considered quite preliminary, but it suggests that the virus can impact the brain directly going through the nose, which makes sense, right, considering all the people who lost their sense of smell early on. But it suggests that once this SARS-CoV-2 virus infects neurons in the brain, it can then travel to other parts of the brain, regions that affect things like emotion, mood, and memory. Savannah?
Now, Erica, could this explain that brain fog symptom that we've heard a lot of recovering patients experience? Is that what this is, or any other cognitive issues?
Savannah, that's exactly right. And that's certainly the theory that these scientists are going on right now. Another new study found marked differences in the brain waves when they compared COVID-19 patients who were never even sick enough to be hospitalized compared with others who tested negative for COVID-19. And basically what they're thinking it meant was that their brains were not working as efficiently or as effectively as they could have. Savannah?
And so now, even with this new report, with some of this information we now have, how much more research needs to be done in order to get more conclusive answers on this disease's long-term impact on people?
A tremendous amount. Again, this is very early. It has not been peer-reviewed yet, but there is a sense of urgency among scientists worldwide to try to figure out what's going on with these people who are experiencing profound fatigue and brain fog, months after their initial infection. Here in the U.S., it's estimated that, that's about 11 million people just in this country alone. And there's no treatment, Savannah. They're really just left either treating their symptoms or really just dealing with their issues on their own. Savannah?
All right, Erica Edwards, thank you so much.
Dr. Bob Lahita joins us now, professor at the Hackensack Meridian School of Medicine and director of autoimmune and rheumatic diseases at St. Joseph Health. So, Dr. Bob, let's stay on this topic of long COVID. What have you seen in patients who are still dealing with symptoms weeks, even months after initially contracting the virus?
Well, Joe, probably the worst case was a patient that we saw about 8 months after being infected, a young man in his early 20s who could not even press the gas pedal or the brake pedal in his car. He couldn't steer, and his father had to bring him to the hospital or for his appointments. We're seeing everything from loss of taste and smell to the chronic brain fog that you heard about, fibromyalgia-like symptoms, inability to sleep, headache, shortness of breath, lots and lots of joint pain, and overall fatigue in general. So it's been a real slog for these poor people who continue to suffer.
Yeah, especially with so many unanswered questions still about all that. Now, doctor, we want to ask you about younger kids getting the COVID vaccine. Of course, this big news. So we just heard there a moment ago, a parent that Allison Barber spoke with. She said she's worried about the side effects her 6-year-old may get for the vaccine, and she might want to take this wait-and-see approach. And actually, according to these recent polls, more parents want to take that approach or definitely not get their child vaccinated than parents who plan to go right away. What's your message to parents who think their kid may be too young to get the vaccine?
The younger the child is, the better the immune system and the more robust the response. The vaccine is exceedingly safe. We are giving the vaccine as of 10:30 this morning at the Hackensack Meridian Children's Hospital and the Jersey Shore Medical Center, and the phones are burning up. Everybody wants to get in with their child before the holidays, when the young children are going to be with the adults, the grandparents, etc. They want to be safe. They want to say that everybody at the Thanksgiving dinner, for example, is vaccinated. It's very safe. Go out and get your child vaccinated as soon as you can.
Doctor, looking ahead, we've got one more age group that still remains, and Pfizer's CEO said earlier this week that vaccine data for kids ages 2 to 5 would likely be ready by the end of this year. I know we just got the green light for 5 to 11, but how soon could even younger kids get the vaccine?
Oh, I think that will be probably after the first of the year, and I think it's, again, perfectly safe. Admittedly, children constitute about 0.08% of the infections that we know about. But there's always that rare child that gets very, very sick with multi-system inflammatory syndrome, and they wind up in the intensive care unit, the pediatric intensive care unit, and it's very, very worrisome. And there's nothing more heartbreaking than to see a little child suffering with all of the shortness of breath, the headache, the pains that we see in adults.
All right, Dr. Bob, appreciate your time and expertise as always. Thank you.
Now to new election results out of New Jersey and the race for governor there this morning. NBC News projects Governor Phil Murphy has won re-election. This actually makes him the first Democratic governor to win a second term in New Jersey in 44 years. Murphy defeated Republican Jack Ciattarelli after an unexpectedly tight race.
Thank you for putting your trust in our team for another 4 years. Thank you for saying we need to keep moving forward on our shared journey to a stronger and fairer New Jersey.
NBC News correspondent Rahema Ellis joins us now from Clifton, New Jersey. Rahema, good morning. This is the one we were waiting for. So Governor Phil Murphy declared victory yesterday. Looking ahead to his next term, tell us what he said.
Good morning, Savannah. What he said is probably going to be a topic of discussion at this diner here, the TikTok diner in New Jersey. It's a favorite spot for people campaigning for office here in New Jersey. And what he said basically was to New Jersey's residents, I hear you. He acknowledged what you pointed out, that he made history being the first Democratic governor to win re-election in this state since 1977. And he went on to say that he wants to move forward, bringing everybody in New Jersey together. Take a listen.
If you want to know what the future looks like, folks, come to New Jersey. If you want to understand where America is heading, look to New Jersey. And if you want to be governor of all of New Jersey, you must listen to all of New Jersey. And New Jersey, I hear you.
He went on to tout his progressive record in terms of education, in terms of women's rights, union rights, and hiring, and the minimum wage being higher here and leading that cause across the country. I think that's something that he realizes that a lot of people wanted to hear from him, and he's now sounding that message back to them.
So, Rahema, Murphy and Ciattarelli, his opponent, I mean, they were going back and forth here with the lead for a little while. It was quite a close race, as we mentioned, unexpectedly. What is Ciattarelli's campaign saying now? How are they responding to the results? And does that closeness mean there's any chance of a recount?
Well, a recount is not automatic here in New Jersey. It would require a candidate to request it. No one, I think, would be surprised if Ciattarelli says he wants that recount. But he's also saying, basically, hold on, not so fast about claiming a presumptive winner here. He sent out a tweet last night. We've got a full screen. I want to read to you what he said. He said, with the candidate separated by a fraction of a percent out of 2.4 million ballots cast, it is irresponsible of the media to make this call when the New Jersey Secretary of State doesn't even know how many ballots are left to be counted. There are thousands of ballots, mail-in ballots that are left to be counted. Those that are postmarked, that were postmarked by November 2nd, which was Tuesday, they have up until November 8th, which is Monday, to be counted. And after that, Savannah, then they start to count the provisional ballots. But experts say that those ballots are basically in Democratic strongholds, and they expect the majority of those votes will go to Murphy. Savannah?
All right, so still a little bit more to watch for here. Now, Rahima, this race, as I mentioned, was closer than expected and can really kind of be seen as a warning sign for Democrats. This wasn't the only race in the state, though. Some down ballot results show the party's hold in the state may not be as strong as they thought. Tell us about those.
Well, one of them, I think, that's getting a lot of attention is the one involving the Senate president. His name is Stephen Sweeney, and he's the longest running office holder in the state of New Jersey. He's now trailing in his bid for re-election behind a Republican truck driver who reportedly spent $153, one more time now, $153 on his campaign. Now, if he holds that lead, it would be a stunning upset in this state for, again, the man who's held his office for the longest in New Jersey history. And it would topple things as far as policies go in the State House and lead to probably a re-election or an election, if you will, of a new Senate leader. Stunning, stunning here in New Jersey.
Yeah, wow. All right, Rahima Ellis, thank you so much.
To Washington now, where House Democrats have added paid family leave back into President Biden's social policy spending package. The proposal includes 4 weeks of paid leave. It was initially dropped last week after opposition from Senator Joe Manchin as Democrats scrambled to hammer out an agreement. NBC News Capitol Hill correspondent Leanne Caldwell joins us now. So, Leanne, family leave back in the bill, it appears. Democrats have been struggling to pass this social spending piece of the president's economic agenda, facing resistance from moderates within their own party. So why add it back only a week after it was removed because it didn't look like it was going to pass with it in?
Yeah, so, Joe, this is House Speaker Nancy Pelosi. She knows this has been a priority for her. This has been a priority for so many women in the Democratic caucus and progressives. And there's actually a lot of moderates who wanted this provision as well. And Speaker Pelosi is making some last-minute decisions before they hope to vote on this legislation as early as this week. And she is saying that one person in the Senate is not going to hold up this legislation and this provision. So she decided to put it back in there. We don't know if it's going to last in the Senate, though.
As we mentioned, it's been getting pushed back, the whole spending plan, from key centrists, mainly Senator Joe Manchin of West Virginia. Democrats are going to need his support to get this proposal through. Doesn't look like he supports adding this back into the bill right now, does he?
He does not seem to be supportive. And in fact, he was actually surprised when our colleague Ali Vitale broke the news to him that, in fact, the Speaker Pelosi was putting it back in the House version of the bill. Listen to how he responded.
Well, hearing that, what do you think?
Well, that's a challenge, very much of a challenge, and they know how I feel about it.
So a challenge. There is a Senate source who told me that it is going to be a fight in the Senate, and they are going to work to keep it in this legislation, but it's unclear if it'll pass with it in it. Joe.
Leanne, I want to ask you about something else happening on the Hill today. Yes, there are other things. Dr. Fauci, CDC Director Dr. Walensky are testifying before a Senate committee on the next steps in the nation's COVID-19 response. Dr. Walensky just approved the Pfizer vaccine for kids age 5 to 11. So what can we expect from this hearing today?
Yeah, the timing is super important. It's coming. This hearing was scheduled before this announcement, but you could be sure that there are going to be a lot of questions about the young children who are able to receive that vaccine. This is definitely going to be a topic of today's hearing, as lawmakers, both Republican and Democratic, are going to want to hear a lot of answers to ensure its safety and also the importance of children being vaccinated in this ongoing pandemic, Joe.
All right, Leanne Caldwell. Leanne, thanks so much.
Let's now get a check on your morning news now weather.
Michelle Grossman is in for Bill Cairns. Michelle, good morning.
Good morning, guys. And guess what? We're off to another cold start. It was so cold yesterday. We're a few degrees colder in some spots today. So we're looking at below freezing temperatures in so many areas. Actually, 106 million people seeing morning lows at or below 32 degrees. So November is here, and we are looking at watches and warnings in terms of freeze watches and warnings for 39 million people. It stretches from the central to southern plains through the Tennessee Valley up through the mid-Atlantic, and this is going to stay in place for quite a while. So right now it's 32 in Chicago, just above freezing in St. Louis, but below freezing in Pittsburgh this morning. You're cold in Cincinnati, just 32 degrees or 30 degrees and 34 in Nashville. So it is cool for November. We're about 10 degrees, even 15 degrees cooler in some spots compared to normal. Atlanta, you're 15 degrees below what is typical for this time of year. So 53 by this afternoon, just in the 40s in Raleigh. You're supposed to be about 65 degrees. And tomorrow that chill stays in place for your Friday. So 60s in the southeast for Savannah, Myrtle Beach, also Jacksonville. And then we start to rebound. That's the good news by the weekend. So as we look towards Sunday and Monday, D.C., we're looking at 64 degrees. That's closer to normal. And we even have a projection of some 70s for the Northeast later next week. But we'll talk about that later. We're also looking at some umbrellas going up in the Southeast. We have a storm system that brought rain to Texas. It's now crossing through the Gulf of Mexico, bringing rain later today into the state of Florida. So we're going to see those showers developing throughout the day. And then it's really Friday where we're going to see some soaking rain. We could see anywhere from 1 to 3 inches. By Saturday, it kind of emerges into the Atlantic. It gets a little more energy, and it's going to bring more rain to the Carolinas. You can see where you see the colors of red and orange and yellows. That's indicating some heavier rain along the coast there. So here's your rainfall forecast, especially in the state of Florida. We're looking up to 3 inches in some spots. That includes Daytona Beach, north of Orlando as well. So if you do have some Disney plans, you may be wet on Saturday. All the way across the country, we're also looking at some umbrellas going up in the Pacific Northwest, even some higher elevation snows in the Cascades. So we have a parade of storms that's going to move through over the next several days, and we're looking at some heavy wind as well. And you guys, as we go throughout the weekend, we're going to warm it up for many of us. I'll give you the forecast for the marathon next hour, because we do have a friend, Bill Cairns, running it. And it's looking pretty good. We're looking at pretty ideal marathon conditions.
Oh, that's good to hear.
Yeah,
You'll enjoy that.
We're so excited for him. And that's a tease, your weekend forecast next hour. Thanks, Michelle.
Yeah.
Coming up, cause for concern, a hypersonic weapons test by China raising alarms for America's top general.
We're witnessing one of the largest shifts in global geostrategic power that the world has witnessed, and it only happens once in a while.
After the break here on Morning News Now, Lester Holt's exclusive interview with General Mark Milley as we enter what he calls a critical time for national security. Welcome back now to NBC's exclusive interview with the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, General Mark Milley. Here's NBC Nightly News anchor Lester Holt.
Savannah and Joe, our journey across America brought us here to Washington, D.C., and to our exclusive interview with the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, General Mark Milley, as part of the Aspen Security Forum. We pressed General Milley about the chaotic U.S. withdrawal from Afghanistan, the new terror threat, and those recent dramatic headlines out of China. Never met in person. My exclusive interview coming at a critical time after it was reported China had tested a hypersonic missile that had first orbited the Earth. What General Mark Milley recently suggested is close to a Sputnik moment.
I think a lot of us were alarmed by your alarm over it.
They are clearly challenging us regionally, and their aspiration is to challenge the United States globally.
Do we have the capability to match what we just saw from China?
Well, I won't go into anything classified as to what our specific capabilities are, or what theirs are for that matter. But I would just say that that test that occurred was a very significant test. We're witnessing one of the largest shifts in global geostrategic power that the world has witnessed. And if we, the United States military, don't do a fundamental change to ourselves in the coming 10 to 15 to 20 years, then we're going to be on the wrong side of a conflict.
Then there's the potential U.S. clash with China over Taiwan.
Is it your belief that China is preparing to make a move on Taiwan in the near future?
The Chinese are clearly and unambiguously building the capability to provide those options to the national leadership if they so choose at some point in the future. But near future, probably not, but anything can happen.
U.S. officials tell NBC News in war games simulating an American defense of Taiwan, U.S. forces have not been able to win a conventional war with the Chinese.
Do we have the capability to defend Taiwan?
We absolutely have the capability. There's no question about that.
Critics say Chinese action against Taiwan is more likely now after the chaotic and deadly U.S. withdrawal from Afghanistan, where the U.S. left Americans and thousands of Afghan allies behind.
Do you think that China, other adversaries, have been emboldened by the perception that the U.S. was not there for one of its allies?
They may or may not have interpreted it like that. If they did, that's a misinterpretation. We gave a lot to Afghanistan. And I would caution any country out there to think that the United States is in any manner, shape, or form kind of weak or any of that. That'd be a bad call.
And Milley with new warnings on the potential for terror attacks here, including from ISIS reconstituting in Afghanistan.
They have the capability to strike the U.S. homeland.
My own personal estimate is that the conditions are likely to be set for reconstituted ISIS or Al-Qaeda. Then I gave out windows of time, 6 months, and I gave it out to 36 months. Does that mean they'll attack the United States? Maybe, maybe not. It depends.
I asked about the controversy and the criticism over Milley's comments in that book by Bob Woodward and Robert Costa, several Republicans calling on Milley to resign.
You became a bit of a lightning rod recently. We saw that your appearances before Congress. Can you tell us how that has impacted your job and if you have any regrets over being as forthcoming as you were with Woodward?
Well, I'm a soldier, and I serve at the pleasure of the president. And when the president no longer finds me useful, then I move on. Until that day, I just continue to serve the country and serve the Constitution and drive on.
All right. Our thanks to Lester Holt for that exclusive interview.
Turning overseas to Ethiopia, the country is in the throes of a violent civil war. The government declaring a state of emergency as rebel troops near the capital. This declaration comes as a UN investigation finds war crimes may have been committed by both sides. NBC News foreign correspondent Matt Bradley has the story.
Ethiopia in a state of emergency, torn in two by a crippling civil war, with rebel forces closing in on the capital city. Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed vowing to quash the assault led by the Tigray People's Liberation Front, or TPLF, in a fiery speech declaring we will bury the enemy with our blood and bones. Under the declaration of emergency, the Prime Minister now has the sweeping authority to draft citizens over the age of 18 into military service and to detain anyone suspected of working with rebel forces. The latest escalation coming as the country marks 1 year of war in northern Ethiopia. Thousands of civilians have been killed and millions more displaced since Abiy sent troops into Tigray last November. The TPLF had ruled Ethiopia for nearly 30 years until Abiy rose to power. Relations rapidly disintegrating since. Government forces launched major aerial assaults on the Tigrayan city of Mekelle last month, killing at least 3 children in one attack. An investigation by the UN in Ethiopia finding atrocities committed by both sides that could amount to war crimes.
The joint investigation team uncovered numerous violations and abuses, including unlawful killings and extrajudicial executions, torture, sexual and gender-based violence, violations against refugees, and forced displacement of civilians.
A staggering 5 million people in the Tigray region are being cut off and are in desperate need of food, according to the World Food Program. Aid crossing enemy lines, now a target for attacks. Desperate people here now caught in the crossfire.
They kill us, not we kill them, they kill us. When they kill us, we are helping them now.
An estimated 2.5 million people have been forced to flee their homes due to the conflict, some of them living under trees near the front lines of this fight. Their anger at the Tigrayan forces apparent.
በዚህ ህብረተሰብ የሚወሩ ያለውን አካላት በዚህ ነው የነሱ እርዳታ የሚያገኙ ያሉትን.
Now, as rebels approach the capital, this regional conflict has exploded onto the national stage, the lives of millions of Ethiopians hanging in the balance.
That was Matt Bradley reporting. U.S. officials say security in the country has deteriorated significantly, strongly warned Americans there should consider leaving.
Let's now take a look at what else is making news around the world this morning.
Raf Sanchez joins us now from Tel Aviv. Raf, good morning.
Joe, Savannah, good morning. 2 members of Chile's indigenous Mapuche community have been shot dead in the south of the country. It's not clear right now if they were targeted or if they were caught in a crossfire, but it does come as authorities impose a state of emergency in the south of Chile in an effort to stop a series of violent attacks. That volcano on Spain's La Palma Island continues erupting after more than 6 weeks. Torrents of molten lava are still flowing out of the volcano, and all flights to the island have been canceled because of falling ash. Scientists are saying the eruption could last another 3 months. And finally, the lights are on all over India as celebrations for the Diwali festival begin. Despite fears of COVID, nearly 1 million oil lamps were lit in the state of Uttar Pradesh. That's a Guinness World Record, the most lamps ever lit at the same time. And guys, the idea behind Diwali is it symbolizes the triumph of light over darkness. Guys?
Wow, those pictures are beautiful.
Yeah, impressive.
All right, Raf, thanks so much. And coming up, a one-on-one with billionaire Bill Gates as he pushes for action on climate change.
Is President Biden doing enough to lead on climate change?
If those 2 bills don't get through, I would say the U.S. Is very disappointing.
When we return, NBC's exclusive interview as he calls for a green industrial revolution.
Also this morning, making history, how Tuesday's election changed the political landscape for the country's LGBTQ community. Next on Morning News Now. Here's a good talker. A high school senior in Missouri decided he didn't want to run for homecoming king, so he ran for homecoming queen instead, and now he's been crowned. Here's images of Zachary Wilmore reacting to the announcement that he was the first male homecoming queen at his school. The 18-year-old, get this, has more than 1 million followers on TikTok. Oh, wow. I don't know how you do that.
Okay, hello.
He made the decision to run after polling them about whether king or queen would look prettier on the sash. Wilmore had a hard time holding back his excitement, as you can see on social media, saying this crowning achievement was, quote, literally a dream. It showed that people actually did care about me.
Oh.
Very, very sweet.
Oh, my goodness. What a line there that people actually did care about me. And apparently he's already famous, so that's pretty cool.
Exactly.
All right. Thanks, Joe. Yep. Now, Bill Gates called for a green industrial revolution at the UN Climate Summit. The billionaire's intervention comes as he faces his share of controversy back home. He sat down exclusively with NBC News Chief Environmental Affairs correspondent Ann Thompson.
Bill Gates. At the climate change conference, Bill Gates challenging the world to act.
Together, we must drive a green innovation revolution.
The green industrial revolution that you spoke of 30 years from now, what does that look like?
Well, it means that when you tour a steel plant, it won't look like it does today. The way that beef gets made, the whole agricultural sector will have been changed.
Can business do it on its own?
Well, we need to have a government policy that incents this activity. You know, unless you can incent it, the idea of just dumping the pollution into the atmosphere, it's simpler, it's cheaper to do it that way.
Is President Biden doing enough to lead on climate change?
Well, we're at a crossroads where these 2 bills, the infrastructure and reconciliation bill, those get through, the U.S. will move into a strong leadership role where we'll be using our power of innovation, we'll be creating new industries. If those 2 bills don't get through, I would say the U.S. Is very disappointing.
Gates declined to address recent headlines that as chairman of Microsoft, company directors had to tell him to stop sending inappropriate emails to a female employee.
What's your response to that?
Yeah, I'm here to talk about climate.
Gates' spokesperson previously denied the report. The 4th richest person in the world did respond to the recently floated and now defunct proposal for a billionaire's tax to help fund an expansion of the social safety net.
Would you object to a billionaire's tax?
The one that they were talking about, you know, I personally think that would be fine.
Gates remains optimistic that the climate crisis can be solved.
Can innovation stop the worst effects of climate change?
Yes. Now, any single innovation has a chance of failure, so you have to fund a lot of different approaches.
The Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation is providing $315 million to help small farmers in the developing world adapt to climate change. The toughest challenge, he says, humanity has faced. Ann Thompson, NBC News, Scotland.
And our thanks to Ann for that exclusive interview.
Election night was a historic one for the LGBTQ community. Once Tuesday night's victors are sworn in for the first time in history, the United States will have more than 1,000 LGBTQ officials serving at once. Here to break it all down for us, NBC Out reporter Joe Yerkeba. Joe, good morning to you. So, of the 237 LGBTQ candidates who are on the ballot, we saw quite a few historic firsts among the winners. What can you tell us about some of the newly elected officials?
Yes, there are quite a few firsts. New York City now has 6 out LGBTQ representatives on its 51-person council, which is the largest group of out LGBTQ council members ever elected in the city. And then in Ohio, Dion Manley became the first trans person elected in the state after winning his race for the Gahanna-Jefferson School Board. And multiple states saw their first non-binary elected officials win. Tu Nguyen won a seat on the Worcester City School Board in Massachusetts, and Xander Orenstein became the first non-binary person in history elected to a judicial position after winning their race for a magisterial district court in Pennsylvania. And the list really goes on, which is amazing, but those are some of the highlights.
Now, I know for your article on NBC Out, you talked to the former mayor of Houston, who was that city's first openly gay mayor. Despite the historic wins, she said she had some mixed feelings about the election night results. Tell us about some of her concerns.
Sure. Yes, Mayor Anise Parker, who's now the president of and CEO of the LGBTQ Victory Fund, which helps elect LGBTQ candidates, told me that candidates in down ballot races for school board and city council, for example, had a really good night. But as you get closer to the top of the ticket in national politics, she said those outcomes are more problematic. And you saw that, for example, she said in Virginia, where a few LGBTQ candidates won re-election, but 2 also lost their races.
So what did she tell you were the biggest obstacles that she thinks are facing LGBTQ candidates moving forward?
Sure. Yeah. She said that many candidates were facing culture war battles. And we specifically talked about how anti-transgender rhetoric has played a significant role in elections this year. And she said many candidates don't know how to respond to that. And she said that candidates have to focus on the issues that matter most to their constituents. And she pointed to Delegate Danica Rome in Virginia, who was the first out trans person to serve in a state legislature after winning in 2017. And she actually just won re-election last night for a second time. And Parker believes that that's because Rome focuses on issues that matter most to her constituents, like infrastructure, fixing roads, bread and butter issues, things like that.
All right. Joe Yerkeba. Joe, thanks as always.
Thank you.
And coming up, the Las Vegas Raiders dropping one of their star players after a deadly drunk driving crash.
And a breakthrough on a deal this morning for struggling drivers of New York City's famous yellow cabs after some of them went on a 15-day hunger strike. That's after the break here on Morning News.
We turn now to the NFL wide receiver facing felony DUI charges. Henry Ruggs appeared in court Wednesday accused of being drunk and going over 150 miles per hour when he caused a deadly crash in Las Vegas. He's now out of a job and facing decades behind bars if convicted. NBC News correspondent Aaron McLaughlin has the story.
Football player Henry Ruggs III wheeled into court to face justice.
This is the case of the state of Nevada versus Henry James Ruggs III.
The wide receiver fired from the Las Vegas Raiders wearing a neck brace, charged with multiple felony counts, including a DUI in the fatal high-speed crash. The police report on the fiery wreck saying Ruggs was driving at 156 miles per hour with a blood alcohol level twice Nevada's legal limit before slamming into another vehicle, killing a woman and her pet.
Defendant's vehicle struck the rear of the victim vehicle with such violent force that it ignited the fuel tank. 23-year-old female occupant and her dog died as a result of the fire.
The wreckage and cones showing the erratic turns the car made before impact. The judge remarking extreme speed was involved.
I cannot recall a speed that high in my career on the bench.
Judge Bonaventure rejected the prosecutor's request for $1 million bail. Ruggs' bail set for $150,000 and the highest level of electronic monitoring. He was also ordered to abstain from alcohol and other controlled controlled substances. Prosecutors claiming a gun was found in Ruggs' vehicle. He could face as much as 20 years in prison.
If somebody chooses to drive while under the influence and drive in excess of 150 miles an hour, we're going to seek justice.
That was Aaron McLaughlin reporting. Now, Ruggs did not make a plea last night, and he could face a maximum of 46 years behind bars.
For 15 days, taxi drivers in New York City have staged a hunger strike. They're demanding relief from the extreme debt many took on to own and operate one of the city's world-famous yellow cabs.
Well, now the city has reached a deal with the Taxi Workers Alliance and the largest holder of their loans, significantly lowering the amount owed and sparing hundreds or potentially thousands of drivers from financial ruin. NBC News Now correspondent Zinkley Esima has been following this story, and she joins us on set. Zinkley, so great to have you here with us.
Thank you.
Great to see you. So walk us through this deal. What exactly does it provide for these drivers, and is it enough?
Yeah, ultimately, it's providing financial relief. Right now, the average loans that drivers have taken out are $500,000. So they're deep in debt. And the reason is these medallions. If you're not familiar, major cities require cabs and taxis to have medallions in order to operate. And so what this deal will do is, A, create a city-backed guarantee. What that means is that if a driver cannot pay off their debt, the lender can't come after them. The city has to support them. Secondly, it caps the debt at $170,000. That's a big deal because, as I said, the average right now is $500,000 for drivers, so that's really big.
Yeah, wow.
And then it caps interest rates at 5% and monthly payments at around $1,000. And so I spoke with Zoran. He's a New York State Assembly member, and he told me who this is going to benefit and why it's so important. Let's take a look.
It's a fight fundamentally about worker dignity. It's also a fight about immigrant justice and racial justice, because we can't separate those things with regards to taxi drivers, since 94% of New York City taxi drivers are immigrants. And these are predominantly men in their 50s, 60s, 70s, people who were actively advertised to by the city as saying, buy a medallion, it's a ticket to the middle class.
And it's important to note that Marblegate is the lender that is engaged in this deal, but not all lenders have signed on. And so we're going to have to follow this story to see how large of an impact this really will have.
Now, a hunger strike, especially for more than 2 weeks, that's a pretty extreme move. It's the type of thing you might see from political prisoners. I know you've been talking with drivers. Help us understand more of the dire situation they're in and why they'd go to this extreme.
Absolutely. I'm glad you asked that, because I was on the ground day 15 of the hunger strike, but it was day 46 of protests overall. And what was striking is that it was very somber, because these were not young people doing the hunger strike, right? They're 50, 60-year-old. I spoke with Richard Chow. He's a 63-year-old driver. He took out a medallion for a loan of about $400,000 in the early 2000s, and his brother Kenny Chow did the same. His brother took out a loan for $700,000, and he told me what that did to his family and the devastating impact on the life of Kenny.
His revenues going down 40%, and he cannot make money pay back to the lender. He lost everything. He lost investment. He lost retirement. He lost exclusive right, and he committed suicide. I'm so sad, and my heart breaking, and I lost my brother, and I miss him so much. That's why we are fighting for the justice.
And what's really devastating is that Kenny's story is not an anomaly. That year alone, 6 professional drivers lost their lives. 3 of them were taxi drivers, and all 3 had medallion debts. And so it's a major issue in this city.
Absolutely. Oh, my goodness, it's heartbreaking. I'm crying a little. Excuse me. So we know that Uber, Lyft, companies like that have taken a bite out of profits here with cab drivers, but that's not the whole story. We heard a little bit with your Assemblyman interview there that the city is responsible in some ways. Tell us about that.
Absolutely. And that's very core to the strike, right? The city ultimately inflated the price of medallions. At one point, they were $1 million. And so what strikers are saying is this needs to change. An explosive New York Times report actually found that lenders were taking millions, and many drivers were ending up bankrupt. And so the hope is that this deal will offer a new opportunity for drivers who so desperately need it.
Absolutely. Amazing reporting, Zinkley. Thank you so much, and so great to have you with us.
Thank you both for having me.
Absolutely. Good to see you.
Time now for our CNBC Money Minute, the biggest financial headlines of the day and why they matter to you.
Bertha Coombs is with us this morning. Hi, Bertha.
Hey, good morning, guys. John Deere, the
company that makes tractors and things, says that it is done bargaining after its striking union workers rejected the company's latest contract offer. The proposal included 10% raises and an additional bonus. The maker of tractors and farm equipment says that it will continue to operate its U.S. plants with non-union workers for now, and is considering sourcing parts and machinery from its overseas factories. Microsoft and Adidas teamed up last month to celebrate the 20th anniversary of the Xbox with the first ever pair of official Xbox shoes. Trouble is, you couldn't buy them. Well, now you can. They now have a new collaboration that will be available to shoppers. The Xbox 360 Forum Mid sneakers feature an Xbox button on the outer side and straps that look like the console's disk drive. They also come with laces in red, yellow, green, and blue to represent the buttons on the Xbox controller. Seems like some truck driver out there is dying to get them. The shoes go on sale today at adidas.com. Meantime, Samsung also getting into the act of tech and clothing. They're unveiling a pair of limited edition jeans that only have one pocket, designed to hold a Galaxy Z flip foldable phone. It's really just a promo for the smartphone, clearly, but Samsung insists that this could be the next big trend. The jeans are available through the Dr. Denim website in Australia, and they're limited. Only 450 pairs are for sale. They come in both men and women's styles. And for $1,100, you get both the jeans and the Flip 3 phone.
Oh.
So basically, they're throwing in a pair of jeans if you buy the phone.
Well, like 90s jeans. I think that truck driver wants the jeans. I think that's why the truck driver's honking Bertha.
They'd be cute together.
I think so, too.
All right. Bertha, thanks so much.
Coming up, Britney Spears now blaming her mother for the conservatorship that she says ruined her life.
Yeah, up next, the new allegations made by the pop star in a now-deleted post on Instagram. This is Morning News Now.
New drama in the legal battle involving Britney Spears.
Yeah, in a now deleted Instagram post, the pop star accused her mother of coming up with the idea of her conservatorship. Here's NBC News Now correspondent Maura Barrett.
Britney Spears pointing the finger at her mother, a new chapter in the battle over her conservatorship. In a now deleted Instagram post, Spears writing, "My dad, Jamie, may have started the conservatorship 13 years ago, but what people don't know is that my mom is the one who gave him the idea. She secretly ruined my life."
What ramifications could posting something like that and then deleting it have in all of this?
It doesn't necessarily matter whose idea it was to file for the conservatorship originally. It's ultimately going to be up to the judge to decide whether or not the conservatorship terminates.
Britney's father, Jamie Spears, relenting on control over his daughter, requesting to immediately terminate the conservatorship. In newly filed court documents, Jamie's attorney saying Britney's recent testimony and request to take personal control of her estate and affairs have made clear that continuing the conservatorship is contrary to her desires. A judge ruling in September to remove him as conservator.
He is trying really hard to get himself out of this situation unscathed. So it makes sense to cooperate.
But in recent court documents, Britney's attorney claims Jamie's reversal is an attempt to avoid disclosing information about the handling of Britney's finances and alleged electronic surveillance recordings of the singer. Those accusations of the surveillance first made in a New York Times documentary. A former security employee saying Jamie and some members of his team monitored Britney's every move.
Her intimate relations were closely managed.
How you doing, Britt?
You know, Britney could not have someone in the privacy of her house without those three people knowing.
The security company, enlisted by the star's father, telling the New York Times, quote, they are particularly proud of keeping Miss Spears safe for many years. An attorney for Jamie Spears insisted he operated within the parameters set by the court. In a hearing next week, Britney is seeking a final ruling on her freedom. Her attorney has made clear in court filings they want Jamie to respond to questions about the alleged recordings.
It would be very unusual to be recording someone who is otherwise competent, independent, an adult. There has to be some overriding reason for recording somebody.
That was Maura Barrett reporting. The final hearing for Britney's conservatorship could happen as soon as next week. That does it for this hour of Morning News Now.
But the news continues right now.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.